In the far north of Scotland, there are families paying less for their land each year than most people spend on a Friday night out. No rent, no landlord, nothing going out at the end of the month. And Scotland is just the beginning. From forgotten islands off the Irish coast, to empty market towns in Yorkshire, to valleys in Wales that the modern world simply walked away from. There are places all across this country where rent has almost ceased to exist. Where communities are so desperate for people to come back that they will hand you the land and ask almost nothing in return. We've lost something in Britain. Most of us can feel it, even if we struggle to put it into words, but it hasn't gone. It's just been waiting, in 15 places that nobody told you about. The Scottish Highlands crofting plots. Let's start somewhere that will set the tone for everything that follows. In parts of the Scottish Highlands, you can still apply for crofting land through the Crofting Commission, a uniquely Scottish system that has existed in one form or another since the Crofters Holdings Act of 1886. A croft is a small parcel of agricultural land, often with a house site attached, and on some of the more remote holdings, the annual rent can be as little as a few dozen pounds a year. Not per month, per year. Think about that for a moment. Less than the cost of a tank of petrol. The Scottish Highlands and Islands were once densely populated. Communities stretched across glens and hillsides that are now empty moorland. The clearances of the 18th and 19th centuries removed entire villages to make way for sheep. The people who were left developed a fierce attachment to the land, and that attachment is baked into Scots law to this day. Today, communities in places like Sutherland, Caithness and the remote northwest coast have croft vacancies. The challenge isn't the rent, because it is barely there. It's the commitment. You must work the land. You must live there as your principal home. You cannot treat it as a holiday retreat or an Airbnb sideline. And it is worth noting that while rents are minimal, finding a vacant croft to take on is not straightforward. The Crofting Commission manages this carefully, and competition for available tenancies has grown in recent years. But if you are the sort of person who has always wondered what life would look like without the M25, without the noise, without the mortgage statement dropping through the letterbox every month, this is a real and legal system, and it is sitting there waiting. The land is extraordinary. Those who have made the move speak of a silence so complete that the first few nights feel almost unsettling. Then they never want to leave. Relocation support on the Scottish Islands. The Scottish Islands have a problem. People keep leaving. Young families move to the mainland for work and schooling. Villages that were once full of life, with a post office, a pub, a school, have slowly emptied. And now islands like Mull, Islay, Tiree, and the more remote reaches of the Outer Hebrides are actively looking for families willing to move in and offering real financial help to make it happen. Highlands and Islands Enterprise, along with various local trusts and community land bodies, have offered relocation packages worth thousands of pounds to attract working-age families. Housing plots at nominal cost. Renovation grants for derelict properties. In some cases, substantially reduced rents for anyone committing to stay and contribute to the community long term. On Giga, off the Kintyre Peninsula, the community bought their entire island in 2002 for £4 million with the help of the Scottish Land Fund. Before the buyout, the island's population had fallen to fewer than 100 people, and 95% of housing was below tolerable standard. Since taking ownership, the community has renovated properties, built new homes, and grown the population to around 170. Plots are available for people willing to live there permanently. It hasn't always been an easy road. The trust faced significant debt along the way, but it stands today as one of the most remarkable community revival stories in Britain. There is a particular kind of beauty to a Scottish island evening that no amount of television can capture. The light changes in ways that feel almost personal. You understand in those moments why people wrote poetry and songs about these places for centuries, and why leaving them broke so many hearts. Near zero rent plots in rural Wales. Wales is doing something rather remarkable. In communities across Powys, Ceredigion and Gwynedd, rural exception sites allow people with a genuine local connection to access building plots at agricultural land value, not development value. The difference between a modest monthly outgoing and a rent that consumes your entire wage. Villages are being hollowed out into second home retreats, empty and dark for 11 months of the year. Community land trusts are pushing back, building modest, affordable homes on land the open market would never normally release, at rents that reflect what people actually earn. If you have Welsh heritage or you're willing to put down genuine roots, doors open that remain firmly shut to property investors. There is something quietly moving about a country fighting this hard to preserve its own identity. Wales has been underestimated for most of its history. It refuses to go quietly. The abandoned villages of rural England. England has ghost villages, not medieval earthworks, 20th century settlements that existed within living memory. Imber on Salisbury Plain in Wiltshire was cleared of its 150 residents in November 1943, given just 47 days' notice. US forces needed the village to practice street fighting ahead of the Allied invasion of Europe. The villagers were promised they could return after the war. They never did. The church, the Bell Inn, the farmhouses still stand inside a Ministry of Defence exclusion zone, opening to visitors only a handful of days each year. Tyneham in Dorset tells the same story. Evacuated in late 1943. As the last resident departed, someone pinned a handwritten note to the church door of St. Mary's. They had given up their homes to help win the war. It ended with the words, "We shall return one day." They never returned either. These places carry a weight that is difficult to explain unless you've stood in them. There is grief in the brickwork. And they remind us that Britain's relationship with its rural communities has not always been kind. Self-build in the East Midlands. In Nottinghamshire, Lincolnshire and Derbyshire, council-supported self-build programmes have helped families build their own homes for 30 to 50% less than market value. And once built, those homes carry no rent whatsoever. You own them. No landlord, no rent review, no letter telling you the monthly figure is going up again. The homes that come out of these projects are well insulated, thoughtfully designed and genuinely built to last. Not the shoddily constructed new builds that have become a national scandal, but houses made by people who actually intended to live in them. For a generation told that home ownership was finished, these represent something more than a house. They represent a restoration of dignity. Rural exception sites in the Cotswolds. The Cotswolds is one of the most beautiful and most unaffordable parts of England. Second homes have colonised entire villages. Schools closing, pubs closing, locals priced out entirely. But rural exception sites exist across the Cotswolds and similar areas of outstanding natural beauty that allow affordable homes to be built specifically for people with a genuine local connection. Priced to reflect local incomes, not investor expectations. It doesn't solve the problem, but it is a reminder that Britain's planning system does occasionally try to protect the right of ordinary people to live where they belong. The islands of the Clyde. 30 minutes from Glasgow, there are islands where modest homes have sold for well under £50,000. For the right person, owning outright and paying no rent is genuinely within reach. Bute in particular has seen a quiet revival, attracting remote workers and families after decades of decline that took the Rothesay illuminations and the old steamboat excursions with it. The primary school role has grown. New businesses have opened. If you are over a certain age, the name Rothesay carries something almost personal. A day trip, A grandmother's story? A man in a flat cap squinting into the Clyde sunshine. That world didn't entirely disappear. Parts of it are still there, waiting, near rent-free plots on Orkney and Shetland. Orkney and Shetland are Norse in heritage, proud of their separateness and responding to rural depopulation in characteristically determined fashion. Community and council bodies have made land available at nominal cost for people willing to build and live there permanently. The winters are long, the winds are extraordinary, but the summers offer light until 11 at night and skies that seem to go on forever. Skara Brae in Orkney, a Stone Age village preserved under sand for 5,000 years, is older than Stonehenge and older than the pyramids. You can walk inside a house built before recorded history and feel that you are part of something rather larger than your own concerns. Some places do that to people. Work for equity schemes in Northumberland. Northumberland is the least densely populated county in England. It has a coastline that rivals anywhere in the British Isles. It has Hadrian's Wall, the Cheviots, the Northumberland National Park, one of the darkest night skies in the country if you care about stars. And it has a long-running problem with empty and derelict properties that nobody is paying rent on because nobody is living in them. Several community housing trusts and local authorities in Northumberland have trialled work for equity or peppercorn lease schemes for derelict properties. The model is straightforward. You take on a long-term lease on a property that requires substantial work, at a rent so low it is effectively nothing. You put in the labour and a modest materials budget. After a fixed period, the property transfers to you. This is not for the faint-hearted. These properties are genuinely derelict, not cosmetically challenged. There are roofs that need replacing, walls that need underpinning, floors that are open to the elements, but there is a particular type of Briton, and he is probably watching this right now, who hears that and thinks, I can do that. Who grew up watching his dad rewire a house on a Sunday afternoon? Who learned from watching and doing, who has spent years in a new build or a rented flat, feeling vaguely fraudulent. For those people, Northumberland might be the answer they've been looking for since the world got too expensive and too complicated to navigate honestly. Community living off the Northern Irish coast. A word about Rathlin Island, because it is part of the same Atlantic world that shaped these islands for centuries, and its story belongs in this conversation. Rathlin Island sits 6 miles off the North Antrim coast, connected to Ballycastle by ferry. It is the only permanently inhabited island off the Northern Irish coastline, and its population, which had dwindled significantly, has actually been growing in recent years, standing at around 130 people, with new social housing delivered by the Rural Housing Association, helping to make that possible. The island has white-tailed eagles, puffins and basking sharks in the surrounding waters. It has a lighthouse and, according to an old legend that the islanders are happy to tell you, it may once have offered shelter to Robert the Bruce during his years in exile, though historians are careful to note this is tradition rather than documented fact. What is documented is that the island has a peace and a severity that city life cannot manufacture and money cannot buy. The Northern Ireland Housing Executive and community bodies have worked to improve services and housing on Rathlin. For anyone willing to commit to island life properly, not as a weekend escape, but as a genuine home, there are opportunities here that simply don't exist anywhere on the mainland. If you grew up in a tight community where neighbours knew your name and your parents' names before that, and if you have spent the last 20 years in a city where you don't know who lives next door, then Rathlin represents something you may have been quietly grieving without ever putting a name to it. Near rent-free plots on Orkney and Shetland. Orkney and Shetland are Norse in heritage, proud of their separateness, and responding to rural depopulation in characteristically determined fashion. Community and council bodies have made land available at nominal cost for people willing to build and live there permanently. The winters are long, the winds are extraordinary, but the summers offer light until 11 at night and skies that seem to go on forever. Skara Brae in Orkney, a Stone Age village preserved under sand for 5,000 years, is older than Stonehenge and older than the pyramids. You can walk inside a house built before recorded history and feel that you are part of something rather larger than your own concerns. Some places do that to people. Work for Equity in Northumberland. Northumberland is the least densely populated county in England. Hadrian's Wall, the Cheviots, one of the darkest night skies in the country, and a long-running problem with empty, derelict properties that nobody is paying rent on because nobody is living in them. Community housing trusts here have trialled peppercorn lease arrangements on derelict properties. You take on the lease at almost no cost, put in the labour and materials, and after a fixed period, the property is yours. There is a particular type of Briton, probably watching this right now, who hears that and thinks, I can do that. Who grew up watching his dad rewire a house on a Sunday afternoon. Who has spent years in a rented flat feeling vaguely fraudulent. For those people, Northumberland might be exactly what they've been looking for. Community living off the Northern Irish coast. Rathlin Island sits 6 miles off the North Antrim coast, the only permanently inhabited island off the Northern Irish coastline. Its population had dwindled for years but has been growing again, now standing at around 130 people, with new social housing from the Rural Housing Association making that possible. The island has white-tailed eagles, puffins, and basking sharks, and according to local legend, though historians are careful to call it tradition rather than fact, it may once have sheltered Robert the Bruce during his years in exile. For anyone who grew up in a tight community where neighbours knew your name and your parents' names, and who has spent 20 years in a city not knowing who lives next door, Rathlin represents something you may have been quietly grieving without ever putting a name to it. Near free housing in Yorkshire's Dales. The Yorkshire Dales National Park Authority has delivered genuinely affordable homes through rural exception policy, exclusively for people with a genuine local connection. Not holiday homes, not investments, actual homes for actual families. If you ever walked the Pennine Way as a younger man, or drove those roads in autumn when the light comes low across the limestone, you'll know exactly what is worth protecting here. The communities that have survived in these dales have done so through Yorkshire stubbornness, the kind that doesn't complain, it just gets on with it. The Isle of Man. The Isle of Man is not part of the United Kingdom. It is a crown dependency with its own parliament, the Tynwald, over 1,000 years old and widely regarded as the oldest parliament in continuous existence in the world. No capital gains tax, no inheritance tax, no stamp duty, income tax at 10% on the first band with a top rate of 21%, housing significantly cheaper than the mainland. For someone who has spent their working life watching their wage disappear before it reached their pocket, those numbers carry weight. The TT races are the Manx language brought back from the brink of extinction. The mountains and glens, this is a place of genuine, lived-in character. Not a theme park version of Britain, the real thing. The forgotten English market towns. There is a particular type of English market town that time has passed by, and if you grew up in one, you'll feel this in your chest. The ironmonger, the draper, the family butcher who knew your order before you opened your mouth. Now half empty, the windows filled with closing down notices and charity shop donations. Houses in parts of County Durham, South Yorkshire, and the Black Country that would cost 400,000 or 500,000 in the home counties can be found for 60,000 or 80,000. A modest income or a small lump sum can eliminate rent from your life entirely. Britain has celebrated these towns, mourned their decline, and largely ignored the people who stayed, who kept the working men's clubs going a few more years, who still go to the market on a Saturday out of habit and loyalty, even when half the stalls have gone. Those people deserve better. The towns deserve better too. Rural Ireland's renovation grants. In 2023, the Irish government launched the Our Living Islands policy, offering renovation grants of up to €80,000 to people willing to buy and refurbish derelict homes on remote Irish islands, from Clare Island off Mayo to Arranmore in Donegal. The property must have been vacant for at least 2 years, and it must become your primary home. For anyone whose grandparents left Ireland during the decades of emigration, who grew up hearing stories about a place they'd never seen but somehow recognised, this goes beyond economics. It's a reconnection with something that was interrupted. Remote working hubs have been built across rural Ireland too. You don't need to be in Dublin anymore. You can do it from a stone cottage on the west coast, with the Atlantic wind coming in off the fields and no rent going out. Some people really do want that, more of them every year. The croft that changed everything. In the early 2000s, a family from Birmingham, both parents made redundant, 2 teenage children, a mortgage they could no longer service, applied for a crofting tenancy in Sutherland. No farming experience, no connection to the area, no clear plan beyond the conviction that something had to change. The croft had a small, cold house and 20 acres of rough grazing. The annual rent was a sum so modest it barely registered. They learned to keep sheep, to grow vegetables in the short northern summer, to fix the tractor, mend the fences, and find satisfaction in work that left visible results at the end of every day. The children, initially furious at being uprooted from everything familiar, grew into adults who know how to build and fix and grow things, who are not frightened of silence or hard work, who know the value of something because they made it themselves. The parents, now in their 60s, have no intention of leaving. "We lost everything," the father said, "and then we found something we didn't know we'd been looking for." That is the story of every place on this list. The land is still there. The communities are still there, or fighting to be. The Britain that existed before everything became a financial instrument, before your home became an asset and your rent became someone else's passive income, hasn't entirely gone. It's just waiting for someone willing to go and find it. So, there you have it. 15 forgotten corners of the British Isles where rent drops to next to nothing or, in some remarkable cases, disappears entirely. Some of these places will test you. All of them will change you. If this video made you think differently about what's still possible in this country, please do subscribe to Simply Britain. And the next video is on your screen right now. We'll see you there.